as a shitty Australian politician famously once said, let 1,000 blossoms bloom. Why can't we?
But I'm not wasting any time with it because there are 2 crocodiles attacked.
Correct.
It's the best,
2 people killed by crocodiles off the coast of North Point.
Liberal Currents presents Half the Answer with your hosts, Caitlin M. Green and Trent R. Nelson.
Well, happy days are here again. The skies above are clear again. Again, the further we get down the line, the more of the song I will sing. Well, you know that understanding a question is half of an answer, and this is, of course, Half the Answer with your co-host, Trent R. Nelson, and, of course, Caitlin M. Green, and you know what we get up to here. I'm a coffee drinker, a historian, a philosopher. I find all of the best, coolest clothing, and I will not be taking questions at this time. And we also have Caitlin, who is a linguist. She is a madre. She's an interior designer. She is a doll maker.
Hey, I have skills I don't have. I will kill you.
I know, it's fun. It's real fun. You heard it here first, folks. There's some violence on the program. Oh, Caitlin, this has been just marvelous every single time we hang out, talking to the most interesting people. To be sure, I feel like Bugs Bunny is speaking to Gossamer, right, as he's doing the hair in the mansion. And that's a shout out for a different audience, I think. Well, who are we speaking with today? What are we learning and what are we going over? This is a really, really interesting really interesting topic. And of course, it touches our modern day, but we got to go back a few decades too, no?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. I'm so excited to go back to the LaRoucheites because I didn't know that much about them, honestly. I really just knew them as those annoying people with the table on your college campus.
Yeah.
And I truly detested them at that time at 18 years old. I was like, the vibe there is bad. I don't know why. I just know that it's bad. It's bad. And I think they had, so I went to college from 2007 to 2011. And at that time, they were doing the Obama Hitler mustache posters. We can get into that in a second. But who I have brought for you is A.J.A. Woods, who is an intellectual historian living in Brighton, England, interested in ideas that we call conspiracy theories. They wrote this amazing book called The Cultural Marxism Conspiracy Theory. It is so great, and I truly do appreciate a book that in its own introduction attacks its title. That's one of my favorite kinds of books. So where they're like, so the thing about conspiracy theories is like they're actually really complicated and not always what you think they are. Amazing. So A.J.A. Woods, how are you?
I'm doing fantastically. I mean, thankfully, I never had to encounter LaRoucheites on campus because I, did my undergraduate in the UK. And when I went to the US, I was in this tiny little art school in the middle of the city, and I didn't think that they had a big presence over in Portland. But
well, I went to the University of Washington in Seattle. Go Huskies!
Oh, yes, of course.
A very big college, right? A lot of people on that campus. I got approached by every kind of organization, cult, sect, religion, political group, whatever there. I had to walk past the anti-abortion, the Genocide Awareness Project, who had the like pictures of mangled fetuses as big as a house, like that they would bring on campus. And I would go up there and I would argue with them, and it was good practice. But the LaRoucheites, they had their Obama Nazi pictures on posters around, like taped around their table, and they were like handing out pamphlets and stuff. And my like inner Oklahoman came out, and I just like did not like that at all. And I just turned around and I just went, "Y'all are fucked up." And that was, and I was like, "Where did that come from? Who was that?"
Deep inside Oklahoma.
Yeah, that was my deep roots in there. Like, I'm not even a natural y'all sayer because I've lived in too many other places. I kind of lost it, but that came out hard and fast. I did not like it. But yeah, that was all I knew. I think I read like half of one of their pamphlets and was like, this makes no sense to me. And it turns out there's a reason for that. So we're going to trace the lineage of the concept of cultural Marxism people today understand it to be something like this like kind of right-wing buzzword. They understand it to oftentimes be kind of a stand-in for saying Jewish. Like it gets used that way. But the nice thing about this book is how it takes us actually through the various groups that have used this phrase and this concept to argue against their political enemies. And it's not always like that. In fact, it's kind of unfair sometimes to just say, like, those are synonyms. You can say cultural Marxism is Judeo-Bolshevism and you can be like, done. It's like, actually, the story is much more interesting. And you start it with kind of the 60s New York City like protest movement, where LaRouche kind of came up. And so I wonder if we could start there. Like, who is Lyndon LaRouche? What was his deal? Why could I not get through more than half of his pamphlet without like losing the thread and going, I don't know, it's not worth my time?
I once had a friend who approached the LaRoucheites at one of their tables, outside of campus, and this is a guy who's sort of very familiar with the Marxist roots of the organization, and started to talk to the people who were handing out pamphlets. And these people had no idea that originally LaRouche presented himself as allegedly the most foremost Marxist economist of all time. So he, in the 40s and 50s, he, kind of had this conversion to Trotskyism. He was part of the World War II, particularly in the Pacific, but when he returned, he sort of got involved in sort of more Trotskyist circles, wrote a number of sort of proposal documents about what the American Socialist Workers' Party, which is one of the big sort of Trotskyist groups, could do to start a revolution in the United States. And his recommendation, especially in the late 50s, early 60s, is we've got to get all of these, what he called Leninist boomers. We've got to raise a generation of Leninist boomers into the organization. And what he meant by that was, students who were interested in radical causes were starting to protest the Vietnam War or get engaged in civil rights struggle. What we need to do is recruit from the ranks of those from those movements and convert them to a certain form of Leninism, where LaRouche is essentially, I guess, the Lenin of the United States Lenin. Some of his Trotskyist buddies were sort of like, yeah, right, LaRouche, whatever. Or to use his old sort of Marxist code name, Lynn Marcus, they were like, okay, Lynn, it seems like you just want to like get a bunch of people who will do anything you want to have them do. So you can just go off and do that. And he started off sort of mingling in circles in the New York student movement, but starting off by running an introductory seminar on Marxist economics. And he was very explicit about how this class was like preparation for being a Leninist cadre, for being the start of a revolutionary party that would lead revolution in the United States. He got into a number of, him and his followers got into a number of scraps with like different factions on the New Left, particularly the early iteration of what would become the Weather Underground, which was a far left group that later on would be involved in using sort of terrorist tactics to attack institutions that they saw caught up in the American imperialist project. But at the time, they were just a sort of separate faction within the main New Left organization called the Students for Democratic Society. And they were quite influenced by the ideas of one thinker from the Frankfurt School called Herbert Marcuse, who had written, in particular, a book called One-Dimensional Man, whereas kind of trying to explain how the traditional working class in the United States had been absorbed into the capitalist apparatus. They could no longer sort of function as a kind of oppositional or revolutionary force to sort of bring a transition to a sort of Marxist society. And Marcuse suggested that all there is in this sort of post-war liberal consensus society is to sort of support kind of disintegrating forces. That means, like, forces that show that the post-war American capitalism couldn't really live up to its promises of ensuring freedom and equality. So this meant the civil rights movement, the movement for women's liberation, for gay liberation, etc. The LaRoucheites had a completely different explanation. It was based in a particular reading of Lenin, saying that what we need is to turn students into kind of Leninist revolutionary intellectuals who can bring revolutionary ideas to the working class from without, and then help to sort of reindustrialize United States along sort of socialistic grounds. As that sort of conflict between the sort of two different factions develop, the LaRoucheites become a bit more sectarian, a bit more paranoid. At the time, the FBI is also trying to disrupt different sort of radical organizations as part of their COINTEL program of spreading leaflets to engineer sort of conflict between different groups. And as we get to the late 1960s and early 1970s, the LaRoucheites start to believe that everyone else in the student movement is a CIA stooge, basically wanting to.
It's kind of an ingenious program, right? Where it's like, we'll do a little bit of this like mean girl bullshit where we say like, oh, he's talking bad about you and like they're planning to mess with you guys. And then you back up and just watch everybody suspect everybody else of being like part of this program to actually disrupt and stop their movement.
It's infectious.
Like, it's horrible how like kind of beautiful it is. And
at the end of the 1960s, the big student organization, Students for Democratic Society, which started out as a much more big tent organization. They had, non-exclusionary clauses baked into their constitution. By the end of the 60s, it had sort of been not infiltrated, but at least, several different kind of political groups were trying to kind of recruit more and more students from SDS and kind of harvest and siphon off support. So there was a kind of incentive to present yourself as the true revolutionary organization and to show that all of these different factions within SDS were compromised, were secretly counter-revolutionary, were chauvinist in various ways. This is sort of why you can kind of see the logic behind the LaRoucheites saying, we are the only people who can save the working class. Everyone else has been sort of brainwashed by the CIA, and only we have like the secret source that can lead people to the sort of new utopia.
Right. Well, they've been listening to the Beatles and taking drugs and like having sex with each other. So like, how could they possibly be effective, right? Like they're just like lying around in piles on the quad now and not doing any revolutions at all, as opposed to us who are in an apartment reading my essay about Lenin, I guess. Much more principled.
Yeah, it's very. In that period, the LaRoucheites had gained a reputation as, I suppose, sort of as intellectual snobs. They put a big emphasis on, going through, the books by Hegel that no one really reads, reading The Accumulation of Capital by Rosa Luxemburg, which is really her most boring work. The
more boring it is, the more cool it is that you read it.
Yeah.
It's very esoteric. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. So, they did have this reputation for sort of producing more kind of esoteric, very erudite texts, especially in their first sort of theoretical journal, Der Campaigner, which is where they would kind of develop this theory of the Frankfurt School being an agent of the CIA to introduce fascism to the United States and the world and engineer a genocide of humanity. And the only obstacle to that sort of secret plan would be, for the LaRoucheites to succeed.
Yeah. For everyone to read my essay and know that that's actually what's true and important, and to act on what I think my prescriptions, right? Because I figured it out. It, as you pointed out, it's like kind of an elitist way of thinking of things, where it's like only the ones who have really like disciplined their minds and studied the correct texts and understood the correct interpretations of those texts are the people who are going to then like take all that accumulated wisdom, hand it down to the workers who can then use it to enact a proper revolution. Otherwise, they just won't be capable.
I mean, replace it with any of our major religions, and here we are. Right? Only the person who listens to the priest who did the studying, who read the text in Latin and Greek before that, right? Only they can explain to us what it really means. And of course, all of the Protestant religions have taken that as well, except that just for individuals, right? It's what I appraise the text as meaning is the meaning of the text. And anyone who says otherwise is a fool. Is a stooge, is a fool, is not perhaps reading it properly, and if only they would come hang out with my pastor, right? We could really get down to business.
I wanted to bring in the term arbitrary ideology because I loved that. I thought that was like a really useful lens to look at this group, where it's this like group that has been socialized to take in and repeat what their leader has given them. And that kind of determines how well they fit into the group. And so like that becomes your incentivizing force of like, I got to figure out how to say the thing back to LaRouche in a way where he goes, yes. Oh, yes. And like strokey beard, and then that's how you know that you've like really got it. You're like in the group. And you start to get this like vocabulary that reflects how much of this person's language you've been taking in, where it becomes like harder to actually communicate with outsiders. And it like becomes more and more of your life, so that you're actually now just in this sort of self-reinforcing situation. And you're just a LaRoucheite. And then you're at the table at my college with the Obama Hitler posters being weird as hell and putting everybody off. And then like, how do you even get out at that point? I mean, like a lot of the information that we have about this group is from people who eventually just went like, I can't do this anymore. This is too much.
Yeah, I mean, there is a literature about political cults and brainwashing that came out of the 1960s and 1970s, largely produced by people who were paid by usually the parents of children who became hippies, and they were saying, you need to rescue my daughter. She's gone to this commune in the middle of Idaho. You need to deprogram them. Yeah. And there was this sense that the people who became members of these cults had been like completely bamboozled by a charismatic leader, and that they were totally innocent and not complicit at all. Yeah. But when you get to the 1990s and 2000s, there was a sort of more sophisticated position on this coming out of the work of a sociologist called Janja Lalek, who was part of one of these socialist political cults in the 70s, but on the West Coast, talking about how actually when you look at the profile or the character of people who got involved in these groups, there was something about them that really kind of appealed to their own aspirations or their own ideals. I think the people who joined the LaRouche movement in the early days particularly did very much passionately care about sort of changing the system, trying to stop the Vietnam War. They sort of saw people like Nixon in charge, and the actions of Nelson Rockefeller, not only when he was governor but also vice president, as something that was dangerous for the country. And LaRouche presented this very elaborate and quite compelling vision of, what had gone wrong and what we need to do to fix it, that people thought, actually, this guy is making a whole bunch of sense. And if this is the way to fix everything, then we need to commit as much as we can. But as the decades go on, and particularly as you get to the 1990s and the 2000s, a lot of that original cadre were like, this guy is nuts. Like this guy, we've sort of,
Right.
And at the same time, like I've wasted my life. I've wasted my life being in this political organization, trying to steer it in the right direction.
So much invested.
And it cost so much for me to exit this.
So what? Yeah, let's get there. What happened from the late 60s
to that guy?
early 70s? What happened from then to, as you said, the 90s, 2000s, where everyone is starting to realize like this is absolutely
How did we get
insane.
from people don't deserve to be conscripted into wars of extreme destruction and trauma, and people deserve to be able to eat and have a roof over their heads and to be free from racism and all of that, and to all those things? How do we get from there to Herbert Marcuse is producing Beatles songs to brainwash people into not being revolutionaries?
Well, and it had to do with everyone else to the left being pissed off with the LaRoucheites by the time we get to the mid 70s. I mean, at the time, the LaRouche embarked on something that he called Operation Mop Up, which was his plan to secure hegemony on the left, and that predominantly meant just members of the organization going around to the meetings of different groups like the Communist Party and beating them up with nunchucks and baseball bats.
Nunchucks. When I read that in the book, I was like, no, not nunchucks, though, right? But it was nunchucks.
Guys, come on.
They literally had a training camp, I think, in upstate New York, where they would sort of train for hand-to-hand combat, etc.
Yeah.
How
to not smack yourself in the nose with a nunchuck lessons. Yeah.
After something like that, everyone else on the American left is like, we don't really want to work with these guys. So your options for, cooperating or building a coalition or forming popular fronts is kind of out of the window. In the mid 1970s, they are LaRouche and some of his closest allies are hatched this strategy to form more alliances with radical right and Republican groups, predominantly as a way to raise funds for his first presidential campaign. And there was a bit of overlap between some of the, I guess, more far right groups that he wanted to ally with, and his own ideological obsessions, particularly around the figure of Nelson Rockefeller, who was vice president at the time, and really the totemic figure of liberal republicanism. So, in the immediate, post-war period, particularly under Eisenhower, the Republican Party, saw value in the New Deal order and kind of wanted to keep things the same. But over the course of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the Republican Party pushed further and further to the right, and people who were further to the right still wanted that process to be accelerated, and saw Nelson Rockefeller particularly as someone who was putting a brake on that process. When they encountered the LaRoucheites saying, Rockefeller and the Rockefeller family are, the heads of this secret elites-led plan to engineer a worldwide genocide and just sort of deindustrialize America, they said maybe we should work with these guys because we've got a common enemy.
Which is so common, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That You'll be on the left and be criticizing some like wealthy industrialist who, you know, like a Bill Gates or somebody, and be like, look at him. He's like hoarding all this wealth. He's directing public health funds in places that are less helpful because he just personally is like crazy about mosquito nets or whatever. And like mosquito nets are good, but you know, like all the money. You know, like pointing out like problems with your progressive goal of getting, you know, the most healthcare to the most people and how they're standing in the way of that. And then on the right, they're like, we also hate Bill Gates. Could we be friends? And you have to be like, but why do you hate Bill Gates? And they're like, 5G in your blood. That's why.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think it is important to like sort of illustrate how the Democrats work a lot with the Eisenhower administration, essentially because the Republican Party is split, as you noted, AJ, into what is often called like presidential Republicans versus like congressional Republicans. And so like the congressional Republicans were filled with like Robert Taft, right, who becomes like the leader of this conservative movement. And the Eisenhowers, as you noted, right, the Eisenhower Republicans, the presidential Republicans are like, yeah, like the New Deal is like basically fine. And like we could like chip away a little bit here and there, but like it's good that people have like safety nets and resources, right? And this is like a constant struggle up until, as you noted, like Nelson Rockefeller, who it's interesting, like gets castigated by people on the left for a famous like bit of illustration of his extreme wealth that he displayed when he was campaigning with Gerald Ford, where he claimed that the average American family made $70,000. Which was simply not true, obviously. But, you know, this like back and forth, you can see it in like almost every political. Yeah.
Well, listen, Trent, I have been to the Rockefeller estate. Okay. I toured it, and they have like almost all of the Picasso tapestries that exist. And I don't think that should be true. I think that those should be somewhere else. They are so cool. And they're just in like a big hallway that you had to pay to access. And that makes me kind of mad. I'll be honest.
I don't know how many times we have to see like liberals and leftists of certain natures siding with right-wing figures before we realize that is never a good strategy. It just never works out.
We're going to keep doing it. We're going to keep doing it forever.
Every time. It's like, all right, you either got to give more healthcare and like education to people, or you got to side with the capitalists. They're always siding with the capitalists.
This is also why, like, my mom is great at this. I love my mom. She's like a really good liberal. And
shout out, Mom.
Like, but she, I shouldn't say but, and she has this really wonderful heart and like a very sharp mind. And so what she will do is she'll see some like lefty progressive sounding message, but it has something about like degeneracy or, you know, like it's like the cushy sort of like lazy lifestyle of like the people who just have whatever they want. The point being, like, whenever she sees that kind of messaging, like some alarm bell goes off in her head, and she points it out before I even notice it, where I'm like, oh, that is a gateway. Like that's an opening, because you can feel that way about America from the left and from the right. And it can cause you decadence. Thank you. That is the word I was trying to think of. I was like, good God, why can't I
just save the whole segment?
No, you can't leave all that in. That was so much waffling. But you know, it's so good to have like a little trigger somewhere in your brain where when you see somebody talking about Americans as like fundamentally incapable of hard work or fundamentally incapable of like deep thinking, incapable of some virtue, to stop and be like, hey, are we advocating like a top-down structure that deprives those people of their ability to speak for themselves and advocate for themselves and get policies that help them? Because we wouldn't want to go down that route, would we? That would be dangerous. And LaRouche was real into that, I think. And that's part of like maybe what helped him befriend some actual Nazis.
Yeah, particularly Willis Carter of Liberty Lobby, who is basically one of the main figures of Holocaust denial in American history. modern American history.
We would have made terrible 19th century Holocaust deniers in America. I guarantee you it would have been atrocious.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
It never happened. It's 1910.
It's not going to happen.
No,
it's not going to happen.
It's not.
Right.
And even if it does happen, it's not going to be as many people as you think it's going to be.
Right.
That is a perfect skit idea. Anyway, because that pipeline, almost pipeline from, I guess, from the radical left to radical right. I mean, it has an effect on how the LaRoucheites present themselves and what they are aiming to do. So in the late 1970s, they're no longer sort of referring to themselves as Leninist revolutionaries. They're talking about themselves as kind of Neoplatonists. They're not leading, the working class. They're leading the American people, or the quote unquote the sheep. Like the shepherds of humanity. That sort of Platonic image that they're trying to push forward.
Yeah, unironically, wake up sheeple was happening.
Yeah.
It was so like paternalistic.
Mm-hmm.
It was wild. I loved. I was just like, this plot is out of control.
Who is the writer?
Okay,
here?
So then we get to the late 70s, and this is when I just started. So I read most of this book last week while I was waiting in a cafe for my children to get out of camp, because their camp was too far from my house and I had to just like stay there. And so I'm sitting in this cafe trying not to like hoot and holler when I get to the Frankfurt School's Assault on Music. Because I'm just like, what's happening here? And it is like, it is this idea that like popular music is a tool of psychological warfare to like disrupt, disorder, dysregulate the brains of the people who listen to it and make them into like useless sheep, basically. And I just like, I couldn't get over it. I was like, yeah, okay, tell me more. Like, I need to know more.
we just recycle these ideas. It's like, first radio's gonna make you dumb, and then TV will make you dumb, and then internet will make you dumb, and social media will make you dumb. And I guarantee you that prior to radio, there were a few Looney Tunes who said that books will make you dumb.
Well, in this case, we got reading. No, it was like the reading and writing is gonna like kill your memory, because you can just write it down and you don't have to remember things anymore. But here we've got Theodor Adorno at Princeton University using the Radio Research Project to like just like experiment on people by turning the radio stations into like transmitters of mass psychic disorder. Encouraging like parents to not hit their kids anymore, because like that like lax parenting thing is gonna create a like undisciplined, like thoughtless animals, basically. It got so weird. And racist. Also racist. Don't forget racist. Because of course, like, what is rock music inspired by and created by and driven by? It's Black people. And to just be like, listen to it, doesn't it just sound like animals to you? It's like so weird. So I guess it's Adorno in the Beatles studio, I guess.
Certainly. And it's so hard to kind of explain the LaRoucheite cinematic universe, I guess, because
please try. We need it. This is unbelievable
for each of them.
Exactly. So okay, so for the LaRoucheites, particularly in the 1970s, Germanic culture is, I guess, the pinnacle of human accomplishment, particularly Beethoven. For LaRouche, Beethoven is, I guess, the best music you could possibly listen to. When he is convinced that some of his followers have been brainwashed by the CIA to kill him, he basically gets some of his goons to take them to his apartment, and they strap them down and sort of play Beethoven at full blast to try and deprogram them.
Like Clockwork Orange. Like actually Clockwork
exactly
Orange.
like Clockwork Orange. And there is a case to be made that some of the early conspiracy thrillers that were made on TV and film in the 1970s actually influenced the way that LaRouche conceived of brainwashing and deprogramming and sort of what he could do to sort of disrupt how the CIA had sort of manipulated people's brains. So Beethoven was seen as the pinnacle of human music achievement because it was like the universal music. It's music that abides by
I just can't get over the idea
principles of tonality.
What we were doing in Western Europe in the 18th century is obviously like the pinnacle of human achievement. Like that's just how brains are supposed to work, is whatever was going on there and then. It just so happens. I don't know. I'm not in charge.
Well, and the things like the Beatles, Bob Dylan, folk music. He also hated tango. Hated the tango as a dance and as like a genre of music, but these are all sort of seen as like sort of particular or partial or sort of linked to particular sort of like national cultures, and so they're inferior to the universal humanistic brilliance of
which is
Beethoven.
Germanic.
Which is Germanic, and I mean, another biographical point that's important to note is that, but in the mid-70s, he marries his second wife, Helga Zeppel LaRouche, who believes all of this stuff, who believes that, sort of Germanic culture is, above all the rest. And that becomes like one of the main the main beliefs within the LaRouche movement. So when they take this on, they need to, I guess, come up with reasons why people actually prefer pop music, or why popular music is so popular, and that fits nicely with some of the ways that they read the work of the Frankfurt School. In the book, I come up with this term called LaRouchian reading, which is sort of a technique developed by LaRouche to really sort of justify whatever batshit interpretation he has about world events or historical texts. And what's incredibly ironic about saying, Adorno was the one to create top 40 radio, top 40 playlists on radio, or the person who wrote the music for the Beatles, the person who was behind the Rolling Stones, is that in his own work he's quite critical of what he calls the culture industry, and the sort of commodification and standardization of aesthetic forms that you would see in popular music, in film and TV shows. But for LaRoucheites, through the method of LaRouchian reading, they're able to turn everything on its head, because they pretty much follow one of the classic tenets of conspiracy theorizing, which is nothing is as it seems. It's the total opposite, actually.
I'm like, aren't you so lucky that I'm here, because I can find the hidden message that's in there. But it also ultimately does boil down to like the same sort of critical reading problem that everybody has all the time, which is like depiction is not endorsement. Where like, he'll be describing a state of affairs, and then LaRouche will be like, see, that's what he wants. That's what he wants us to have.
Yeah. I mean, again, I find it interesting because like the criticism of like capital's use of different aesthetic like techniques and like adopting different cultural means to sell things is like a fairly popular critique in the late 60s, early 70s. Like Frank Zappa is like very famous for writing an album called We're Only in It for the Money, in which he's basically just lambasting the Beatles for like all of a sudden becoming a psychedelic band after they were like a boy band, So I don't think that is in itself a strange thing, but as you noted, like sort of being able to twist everything into being like, it's even more insidious than that they're just trying to sell you stuff. They're trying to like convert you into like a weirdo as well.
Right. Yeah. So now you know that the Beatles became a psychedelic band because the British government told them to do it so that everybody would be on too many drugs to do a revolution. And so like that clears it up, solved.
Right. The English
And then
government
at the same
famous.
time getting all the kids gyrating so hard that they what was it, revert to the cultural status of Aboriginal peoples. That's not racist at all, of course. That's just a cool thing to say.
Yeah.
And then you get into the sexual depravity area where it's like people are indulging in their like bodily lusts so much that they forget to build nuclear families that have a man and a woman and 2.5 children. And so that's how like society falls apart. Like that you can hear from any Republican congressperson today. Right. But here it was like a counter-revolutionary.
Yeah, in the 19. I mean, it's so bizarre. The LaRouche reading thing is so bizarre because, for instance, they I guess have an overestimation of the power of particular texts to change the world in a way. In one of his works, LaRouche writes that Marcuse's one-dimensional man essentially turned people gay, and this was part of the secret elite's plan to eventually engineer the AIDS epidemic. And so he, you not only have, I guess, kind of racist strains of racism in the work, in like the philosophy of the LaRoucheites, but also quite intense homophobia. And when you look back at how people were speaking and writing about the AIDS epidemic at the time, people thought that it could spread from sitting on a toilet seat. And I guess if you'd sort of been hanging around with LaRouche since the early 70s, you'd be saying, the elites are going to like be planning a genocide to kill everyone off. Him going, look, pointing at AIDS and going, look, this is when it's actually going to happen. Of course, the Frankfurt School were behind it the whole time.
Of course they were. It's so logical.
That particular strain of conspiracy theory, right? That like we're all going to be murdered by some mass illness or disease. It's actually much better than, Jesus is coming back, right? Because you say that and he never comes back, and then you got to keep making excuses, right? But every time there is like an actual like global medical issue, right? You can always just say, well, this was the lab in China. This was the global elites. This is that. That's
very like Alex Jones's whole MO, RIP to his show, right? Where he would be, and he would look at like government issued documents that were, what should we do to save the most people in the event of like a mass extinction event or any kind of like very dangerous event that impacts a lot of people, right? Because they do those sort of playthroughs of like, what do we do in this case, in this case, in this case? And he takes those documents and he's like, see, they're planning to do it to you. And it's like so easy. That's my Alex Jones impression. I'm famous for it, actually. Unfortunately, he's no longer like employed, so what's the point?
I missed him so much. In fact, that was one of the first things I ever watched when I got access to the internet as a 12-year-old. I just
was InfoWars.
I got hooked on InfoWars. I mean, I could see that it was patently bullshit, but it was incredibly entertaining.
Yeah. We definitely come from different worlds, because you were doing that and I was watching like British and Australian stage comedy, like pirated. That's where I went, because I was in America with my British mom being like, why can't I watch any of the stuff you're talking about? And then I found the internet. And
that was an incredibly common experience of sort of Americans with British parents, of how they always do kind of references to TV shows that you've never heard of or seen. And you're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I already did an Eddie Izzard, Susie Izzard reference. If anyone caught it, 10 points to you. But yeah, that's the particular like disease that I have, which is, it's called British mom syndrome. And it's incurable, I'm afraid. Like, I can't get away
It
from
is
it.
incurable. I have English grandma syndrome, and it's almost as bad, but I do eat everything with a knife and a fork now.
Very
After
good.
castigating it
And
as
I
a
drink
child.
all my beverages without ice. I have to tell the people, like, no ice in my soda, please.
Hey, why is there solid in my liquid? This isn't the deal.
Well, because I'm still firmly of the belief that if it's not water, it shouldn't have ice in it. Because what are you doing? You're just putting water in it for later. Like, you're saying, I would like this delicious beverage to be watery in 20 minutes. That I don't sign up for that. I don't want that. So don't put ice in it. I want it to taste like the thing it is, not like a watery version of it. And that's my soapbox. That's the one. That's what's going to get us the most yelled at, probably, is that I don't like ice.
If you were going to put
beverages.
water in my beverage, I expect you to do
Just
it
skip the
before it
middleman.
gets to my
Put
table.
The water in.
Yeah, like make it
is
that
it a
way.
watery drink or is it not?
Yeah, exactly.
I am pro ice, but like the frozen water and not like the immigration
that kind. Not
people. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Very good. Thank you.
The other day, I was wearing a shirt that was like a water and ice shirt, like, so it had ice really big, and it didn't like clock to me until somebody pointed at my shirt and were like, "What are you trying to say?" I was like, "No, it's a joke. Oh my god, it's Christoph and Sven's ice delivery business. It's from Frozen. It's a Frozen thing. Like, please don't hurt me." I'm with you. I'm on your side. It was intense, but I got through it. Also, yesterday I saw a beautiful T-shirt from a librarian. It said, "Does reading make you gay? Come find out." And I feel like the answer must be yes, as long as they have the one-dimensional man, I guess, is the answer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
As long as you can check that one out. Yeah. Okay, so we did the 70s. Good job. Now we can go to the 80s. This also reflects my reading experience, where I spent so much time on that first chapter because I was having my mind blown every page. And then, like, as we get closer to the current day,
so yeah,
I was texting you about it from the cafe, like, Trent, Jesus, okay, look at this. So then as we got closer to the current day, I was like, well, I was alive for this. Like, I do know some things about this. So I was able to go through it a little quicker. But the 70s and 80s, I wasn't here. And I'm just flummoxed and amazed. And I cannot believe, actually, first of all, just how wild everything was. But secondly, how many through lines there are, right? Where, like, we've got the thing about, like, moral degeneracy and popular media sort of sneaking in messages and encouragements to, like, drive us into degeneracy, abandoning the nuclear family, abandoning child discipline. You can see all of that stuff here in the current right wing.
The messaging. 80s is our first modern goofy era. Right. The 80s, like, now we're in a second goofy era where nothing matters. Everything is ridiculous. And everyone just is, like, willing to believe the dumbest shit in the world. That, I feel like, first came, like, in the late 70s into the early 80s, where it's just like, actually, like, we don't need taxes. We don't need to have a well-taxed society. We should, like, start cutting extra milks from children at school. We, like, there must be a satanic panic because why is my preschooler learning all of this from their instructor at the preschool, right? Like, there's all this nut job shit that is difficult when you look back on it to, I think, really like articulate, like, why everyone was so, like, apt to believe the most cynical, ridiculous shit. But I actually think, and we've spoken about this in a past episode, it stems from this sort of lack of trust that develops in the late 50s into the early 60s and through the 60s with the credibility gap that Johnson is famous for having, just, habitual liar. This idea just became so perpetuated that I think people were willing to believe the most outlandish shit because everyone is lying to us, which means that the lies must have some truth in them, actually.
Yeah. Well, I think this is where your conjunctural analysis is really crucial, right? Where it's like at times of crisis, this is like a beautiful little like crunchy nougaty center in between like two kind of social orders where people are like, explain why everything is fucked. Right? Like, why are we experiencing so much turmoil? Why are some people like in the streets with signs? Why are so many things more difficult than I thought they were before? Why am I being forced to like think about things I never realized were important, or that like I still don't agree are important or whatever, right? And so for some people, the answer would be, we've always had some kind of a structural problem that has been leading us on this path to this moment of crisis. And for some people, it's fucking Adorno in the booth with the Beatles. Like, it's like, I don't know, something's happened, you know, somebody's brainwashing everybody to be crazy. And like which way you go kind of tells you what you think the fix is as well. Okay, so like let's get to the 80s. Our guy LaRouche, he did what every good cult leader does, which is just a little bit of financial crimes. Just a little white collar crime, just to put the icing on the cake. He took a bunch of loans for political campaigns and was like, what if that money was for my house instead? What if I made my house beautiful? Was it beautiful? Have you seen pictures? Have you been there? How's the estate? Is it gorgeous?
I would love to. I mean, Washington DC is on the destination list, and then immediately as soon as I get into DC, I'd be like, "Can we go to Leesburg, Virginia, please? To go see the estate."
Take me with you, okay? I'm coming. I want to see this thing.
Road trip.
Yeah, no, as soon as the LaRouche organization finally falls apart, because it's still crawling day by day now, but as soon as it closes, I'm like, I need to like start like the Lyndon LaRouche Memorial Museum at the estate.
Get in there.
That is my dream job.
We'll post your GoFundMe or your Give, Send, Go or whatever it takes.
You would be an incredible curator, and I can only imagine the outfits that we'd get to see as you were leading us through the house. That's top tier.
Oh, it's going to be so good. Okay, so I'm going to assume, you know, beautiful spiral staircases, marble, topiaries probably. I don't know. What do rich people have?
I think they had a wine. They definitely had a wine cellar. He built a wine cellar with the money, I think.
Yeah, because of that aesthetic lifestyle he cares about so much, where he wouldn't want to indulge in any vices. Let's get that wine cellar going.
The demagogue has an advantage in that while a reasonable individual, even an intellectual, would stop before giving this sort of explain all solution, right? Like grand conspiracy. Because life is so much more complicated and precisely problematic in certain ways, that there is no grand fix-all solution, right? But the conspiracy theorists, the demagogue, they use that to their advantage, because that is what the people, to varying degrees, long for. They, you know, there is a longing for a catch-all fix, just one problem that explains all of the problems. And because we don't have that, but long for it, that tool is always in the tool shed, which is why we see people in every society, when they're trying to take advantage of a democratic situation, they'll pull that out and use it. That actually all the people that have been doing this are bad and ineffective because they haven't identified that it is actually Adorno and the Beatles that is the problem. And if we could just have somebody who does that, we'd be on to the right path.
Well, LaRouche even has
Marxist.
LaRouche even has an essay where he says, "Oh, everyone who says that, you know, society is too complicated for this grand all explained thing, too complicated for explain everything solution. Those people have been paid by the CIA to tell you that it's not an explain all solution. So you should all listen to me because I actually have the fix for
everything."
Amazing.
If you disagree with me, that's just your CIA brainwashing talking. I'm so sorry to tell you. They got to you. You better come to my compound and we'll deprogram you. It's going to be so fun. There's wine.
That is S tier level excuse, right? Like, you're not getting better than that. And if you got people that believe that, like, you're in good business, which he was, as we've noted, for many decades. So yes, what is the 80s like in this circumstance for the third time?
How did we do in the 80s?
So
can you tell us what the 80s were like?
He goes to prison around the same time they live as in the cinemas, if that helps you to contextualize it at all. So he wasn't able to go see John Carpenter made They Live, right? That was one of his films.
I think so.
Right?
Yeah. He wasn't able to see John Carpenter's classic They Live in cinemas because he was in jail. Because if you look at the court transcript, his defense lawyer said, people will you'll hear from the prosecution that LaRouche is a cult leader, but that is a lie, and it's a lie that was made up by the Frankfurt School. So even when he's trying to get off the hook for credit card fraud, it's still all about the Frankfurt School coming after him.
I'm only here because of the Frankfurt School scholars. Why not?
And in the late 80s and late 90s, the LaRouche movement take advantage of the growing debate around political correctness on college campuses, particularly around the issue of affirmative action for applicants from Black and Latino backgrounds, as well as what I think now referred to as the canon wars, of saying, literature classes should be more open to books written by Black authors, by women, by people from the global South. For the LaRouche,
they're replacing Shakespeare with Alice Walker.
For the LaRoucheites, that was all traceable back to the Frankfurt School. So because
we can wave this.
Adorno in particular wanted you to. Adrian Daub is perfect on this. It goes back
previous
to
guest Adrian Daub.
Oh, beautiful. It goes all the way back to that, sort of classical German culture is universal culture, and anything else is sort of a partial culture that reduces you to the status of animals rather than turning you into a human being. So that was part of what the LaRoucheites saw as the Frankfurt School's grand plan to divorce people from their real human essence and turn them into beasts that could be more easily manipulated by showing them MTV and like catering to their more sensual urges, etc. So political correctness was ultimately just a way to destroy American democracy and bring down Western civilization itself.
Yeah. So what we had was all these like LaRoucheite ideas, and then the essays of his followers that kind of like really lay out the genealogy, which then kind of make their way over, I guess, to the right wing. And so like you pointed out kind of three major books that kind of brought in this idea of the Frankfurt School being responsible for all this campus stuff. So we have The Closing of the American Mind in 87, Tenured Radicals in 90, and then Illiberal Education in 91. And like even putting D'Souza in there makes me so mad because I'm like, he doesn't deserve to be next to Kimball and Bloom, even though I don't like them either. I'm just like, that goofball, why? But it's true. Like that book, Illiberal Education, was like, it was huge.
Yeah, all three of those books were massive, and they were part of a larger publishing craze for kind of right-wing exposés of what's going on the crazy campuses. And it's less that they popularized the idea about the Frankfurt School bringing political correctness, but those were books that were kind of in the atmosphere that very much influenced the LaRoucheites who were writing about the Frankfurt School. Adopting some of the arguments around political correctness and multiculturalism.
Yeah.
No, but it's precisely what allows those.
So this is like floating in the. Yeah, it's created like fertile ground, right? Because everyone knows about this idea now that campuses are out of control. There's like left-wing freaks running all of your kids' colleges, and they're just waiting to get their hooks into them, turn them into communists. And then like you take that sort of existing attitude and you say, I'll tell you who to blame. I'll tell you exactly who.
Well,
it's these guys.
You say it for long enough, consistently enough, and what becomes of it? It becomes commonplace for the average person to say very confidently that this happens everywhere, right? And so we look at this campus craze, panic that we've been dealing with for the last decade, but it starts, as we're just talking about, obviously they've been laying the groundwork for all of this, and they always do. And when we sort of, as you always say, Caitlin, when we debate them on the own things that they say, on their premises, not only can't we win, but we're actually only further validating these premises, which are not correct.
You're not winning an argument with the wallet inspector by accusing him of not actually having been interested in your wallet, like looking, like checking the wallet, right? Like you don't actually. He still has your wallet, so like you kind of have to get a leg up before that point.
Yes, absolutely.
I love this like aesthetic kind of fixation too, because I am a highly aesthetically fixated person myself. I'm proudly shallow, so that's where I'm at. But we have this concept that I have noticed a lot coming out of like Richard Hanania type people today, which is that the political correct people, the cultural Marxists, they want you to pretend that ugly things are actually beautiful, right? This is like came in with the rock and roll thing. It comes in with like the body acceptance and the anti-racism and all of that of like saying there are culturally imposed beauty standards, and there's beauty outside of those standards that are also beautiful. And so today we have this like freak obsession with Sydney Sweeney and her amazing boobs, and being like, this is what they're trying to take away from you, right? Because we're supposed to pretend that that's not beautiful. And then we also have the freak out over Lupita Nyong'o being Helen of Troy in the new Odyssey movie, and being like, they're trying to force you to pretend that she's the hottest person. And it's like, I don't know, man. I just have eyes. Like I just saw her and was like, that's a beautiful person. I didn't have to pretend. I didn't have to check my copy of, The One-Dimensional Man or whatever. Like, I just thought she looked nice. Am I not allowed to do that?
But again, like accepting that there lies beauty outside of what is traditionally conceived, that doesn't mean that beauty is not beautiful. It just means that there are other beautiful things as well. The strange part about this whole argument is that while the argument doesn't exclude traditionally conceived of beauty from being perceived as beautiful, right? Like the alternative does. It means that there's have to be ugly things, and we have to look at certain things as being unbeautiful, as being less than. When in reality, as a shitty Australian politician famously once said, let 1,000 blossoms bloom. Why can't we?
But I'm not wasting any time with it because there are 2 crocodiles attacked.
Correct.
It's the best.
2 people killed by crocodiles off the coast of North Queensland.
That's right.
Legend.
The switch up, just legendary. Yeah, from like
Incredible.
it's so sweet how people love each other, but listen up. Thing about it is crocodiles. Right. Well, that's the sleight of hand that they love to do, which is to say that like, oh, on this side, they're telling me that there are actually more kinds of ways to think and more types of people to value than I would like, because I would just like to value this particular like cisgender heterosexual white family unit. And I want to put that above others. They're telling me I have to also value other forms of life than just that. And so what I'm going to say instead is that they're trying to take it away from me and tell me I cannot actually value family, or I cannot, love. And so like it twists your brain in ways where like, I have people telling me that I'm trying to destroy the nuclear family. Meanwhile, I'm a married white lady with 2 kids. Like, I think I'm doing okay in terms of like upholding the nuclear family. Like, I don't know. I think it's just the fact that I think there's other ways to have a life that's unacceptable.
It also has to do with the strange obsession, particularly I think on Twitter, with the sort of animated, or I guess the artistically drawn images of the 1950s of going, back in the 1950s, look what they've taken from us. These,
which are all
these
like
pristine
magazine ads, but sure.
Pristine neighborhoods. And so, like, but most of them want to live in this kind of very idealized, I guess, marketed image of what America was supposed to be. And this sort of very nicely leads on to the figure who would later pick up the idea of cultural Marxism and popularize the term as an ideological weapon, William S. Lind, because his big ambition was for everyone to live in what he called a retro culture, which ultimately is just sort of saying, let's pretend that the last 70 years didn't happen, and let's just all like buy a house with a white picket fence and just pretend that those advertisements from the 1950s were real life.
Yeah. We're literally going to be in like Audrey's fantasy from Little Shop of Horrors. Like, we're going to live somewhere that's green, plastic on the furniture to keep it neat and clean. Like, it's going to be so good. And it is very silly, obviously, because as you say, like what they're looking at is print ads. They're looking at magazines. You can literally see the pencil marks on these things. Like, they are not real, buddy. They're a picture somebody drew. They need to all rewatch Mad Men or something so they can remember that like somebody made that up in an office, buddy.
It's the ideology of the longing child. Ultimately, I mean, you see a lot of people that say they want to go back to the 50s or the 60s, and you do the math with how old they are, right? And they were young people during those times, right? So it's not so different from
Mommy brought me my snacks. And picked up all my toys.
It's the same thing that actually exists right now, right? Where there's this like longing nostalgia that the marketers have tried to impose, where like everything is like it was when I was a child during the 90s, right? And like this longing for the 90s. The 90s was not fantastic, right? I'll break it to everybody. It was not great. And the only thing that made it great was that, as you noted, Caitlin, Mom brought us Dunkaroos. Right? Like there were cartoons on when I came home from school. The rest of it was bullshit. And that's what the 60s was to these people. The 50s was to these people. It's a time where like, I didn't realize that Mom was on Valium and everything was like really good. But
today we have Michael Young, right, from the Center for American Renewal or whatever the fuck it's called, Russell Vaught's guy, who like is posting AI generated images of Nintendo, like kids playing Nintendo and being like, return.
Have you seen the TikTok trends of like, I think it's usually like Gen Alpha or Gen Z people saying, I wish I'd lived in the 90s when they made their own sweets and like it wasn't bought. And so like the 90s were like the prime era for the most artificial tasting shit you could possibly put into your mouth. And then pretending like we lived in like the 1830s.
I have nostalgia for the 90s because, again, I was in elementary school in the 90s. But my nostalgic memories are like getting on my bicycle with my parents and like riding to the like the convenience store and buying the prepackaged treats that were there. Like that's what we had. A lot of, you know, we weren't all living in our little like trad wife homesteads. Even me, I lived on literally the edge of like white suburbia in Phoenix, like the very bleeding edge. We were the last row of houses before the houses stopped. And yet we still would go to the convenience store and we would buy our candies as God intended from the large corporations that produced them.
It was beautiful. It was a beautiful time. I mean, Long Island in the 90s was as they depicted. It was outrageous and full of racism, and also like, yeah, stores where you walk to with your mom and bought candy. And this is, we don't need to doll up the pig here. I mean, all of the times in which people grow up in are fraught with hardships, and also like the small beauties that we remember and take from everyday living.
Yeah.
And to try to over dramatize that, I think, again, much like the overarching conspiracy solution, right? It plays to perhaps our inane desires, our subconscious wishes for things to be simple and pleasant. I mean, this is why you hear often also this like weird fairy tale image of like, man, it's like very Unabomber-esque, like Super Ted Kaczynski. Like, if only like we didn't have to go to work, I could live in a homestead, and that would be a better life. And I hate to break it to, I break it to him all the time. I'm like, that is backbreaking, terrible labor. Like, and you don't actually want that. What most of these people want is like a half-baked best of both worlds, where I live in a cabin but have all of the technology that human civilization has created through like collaborative effort and the hardships of existence for years. It's
you want to do the ballerina farms thing, which crucially step one of which is be a billionaire, like have just heaps and heaps of money, then go establish your homestead. Like, yeah, okay, it's easy if you do it that way, sure. Okay, so now we're on to the new right. They have taken these concepts and they have sort of fused it with their own feelings about how the country is going, and it all boils down to essentially moral and cultural degeneracy, right? Like, so here we have the kind of the fusionist kind of attitude for the right wing, where they're like, I bet we can find something that we can all like animate around and we can organize around, and we're going to get somewhere that way. What happens after? I don't know, whatever, we'll get there. But this kind of, to me, was really interesting because we came to this idea of the groups, which if you're living today in 2026, the groups means something very specific. But like, I, again, made a noise, I think, when I saw the groups, because to the new right, the idea was we are freaking out because there's this like managerial, like new class group of people who have some of those jobs where they have influence and they have enough money to be dangerous, and they keep funneling resources to the groups, which means like Black people, feminists, the lower class, like single mothers and stuff like that. Like, they keep giving all of our resources over to who we think is gross and yucky and undeserving. And to me, I was like, not the groups, because I've been watching this like third way sort of like centrist Democrat like organization structure of people who are trying to get the Democratic Party of the United States to, quote, ignore the groups. And I was like, the phrasing is too close. I don't like it. And what they mean is labor unions and the ACLU. When they say the groups, they want the Democrats to forget about those people. And so, yeah, that's, a shiver went up my spine when I was like, oh, the groups, because it's like such a phrase. It's not something you would say naturally unless you were trying to make this kind of like scary, like, you know, this scary impression on people. I didn't like it. I liked your book. I didn't like that part because it freaked me out.
Yeah. I mean, it is often opposed in like American political discourse to an image of the people. And for the new right, the people is very clearly, very heteronormative. It's white. It's
Right.
particularly but particularly a kind of not necessarily a middle class, but what they would kind of see as a sort of social middle. The kind of white suburban family is kind of the ideal that they're going for. People who, a couple of decades earlier would have been like the ethnic Europeans, but now have been subsumed into sort of like white America more generally. And I think that, I mean, well, when you get to the 1990s in particular for the new right, there are there's a sort of a lot of confusion about what they should do. But Paul Rywick, who's the head of the Free Congress Foundation, who I talk about in the book, writes quite a famous letter called "Letter to Conservatives," saying, we've sort of lost the culture war. We've lost the struggle for, a hegemony of the culture. Even when we get into political institutions, we're not able to reverse this horrible onslaught of degeneracy. So what we need to do is this sort of retreat into little enclaves of traditionalism, of sort of Christian fundamentalism. This is around the time of the sort of the Patriot movement. So you sort of withdraw into these tiny little cults to defend yourself, and just sort of wait for American civilization to collapse, and then we will rebuild a new civilization out of the ruins, because American society, for the people in the new right, had been too had been completely infected by cultural Marxism. For the new right, the Frankfurt School is essentially one. You had affirmative action, you had speech codes, you had MTV, you had video games, all of these different markers of cultural decline. But for them, the Frankfurt School were to blame for all of this, and the only way out was to sort of escape from the mainstream and maybe cultivate an alternative on the margins. William S. Lind, who I brought up, was a little bit earlier, was on one side like a cultural. A cultural warrior, a kind of mercenary in the culture war. He was sort of very critical about multiculturalism, but also in his other work, a sort of military theorist. So his idea was essentially that in the late 20th century and early 21st century, the state had lost its monopoly on warfare, and that warfare was now the prerogative of different kind of cultural units, represented by the Patriot movement in the US, who sort of represented like traditional Christian values, Al Qaeda, for instance, sort of representing Islamic values. And so he saw kind of nations falling away and there being a kind of greater clash of civilizations coming. And he was very influential on Samuel Huntington's work on this matter. And so for William S. Lind, the nation state, particularly in America, which had been overrun by the doctrines of the Frankfurt School, would soon just sort of completely disintegrate. And what proper conservatives needed to do was prepare for this period of intercivilizational conflict, intercivilizational warfare. And you can see how it kind of anticipates the sort of lone wolf ideological shooter phenomenon. Because a figure like Andrei Breivik, who was the white supremacist terrorist in Norway, who killed a bunch of kids at a summer camp and blew up some government buildings. Kind of definitely fused kind of military war and culture war. He was this figure of white Europe taking on the decrepit liberal state, but also trying to sort of stem the tide of cultural degeneracy, whether that is just political correctness or feminism, or what you saw as the tide of Islamification.
Right. Because now that we're in the 2000s, you can really see how easy it was to bring in the concept of Islamification, right? Of like,
Right.
cultural Marxism, it has weakened us to the point where we're now accepting all of these Muslims in, and they're also, bringing in sort of this like predatory war, like authoritarian, Sharia law, like all of that stuff was just easy to slot in, right? I love. Did you read the book that Lynd wrote about his like imagined future for Victoria?
Yeah, I read it 3 times.
Was it a good read? Was it fun? Did you enjoy it?
It is fascinating if you're a person who spent close to a decade trying to understand the contents of William S. Lynd's mind, because I mean it's incredibly telling, and it essentially frames him and his work as prophetic. It is not only just a prophecy of how the West will fall, but a blueprint for how to rebuild like a Christian country. So it is a fantasy that
weird
came
like
up with.
hero fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The
idea that
what
like
if I was totally
America...
right about everything?
Imagine a world in which everything I said was going to happen totally happened, and the only way to fix it was to do exactly what I said. And like my very favorite thing about it, I think, is that the narrator / protagonist like found out about all of the secrets of history and the way to fix it from his website, traditionalright.com, I think, which he put the URL of in the novel. And then you can go there and it's a live website of like all of Lynd's bullshit. And okay, my other favorite part is that on that website, you can see a picture of William Lynd, and they will tell it has his bio, and it goes like this: William S. Lynd is a paleoconservative author and proponent of fourth generation warfare theory. He has served as a legislative aide for various senators. So it's got a typo right there on the second sentence too. So he's immortalized that, and that's very beautiful to me.
How many of these like constructing a better civilization, a better Christian civilization, like doctrines, how many of them are actually just like Protestant Reformation Calvinist like reworkings? Because that's what they always feel like to me, is just always like society is bad because people are dancing, and also like only the elect know anything.
Black people and women got a little too confident in their status as full human participants in democracy, and we needed to knock them right back down a peg. And in our beautiful utopia, which we've established, they are now back in their subservient places and thrilled about it. They love it. They're so happy. It's so relaxing, actually, to to understand your role, as like, I don't have to make decisions about where my society goes because I am chopping vegetables, and that is great.
Well, that's why they call themselves Neoplatonists, because mutual coordination, right? Everybody being in their perfect perceived place, doing their perfect perceived role, and not straying outside of that, Caitlin. Right? Why don't we just let the elect lead, and I will do the dishes? Very good.
I'm not even that good at dishes. I don't think you should trust me to do that. I think you should let me make the decisions, and someone who's more talented at dishes can do the dishes. So the other thing about that book in particular is how it is full-throatedly in favor of the idea that the only good communist is a dead communist, and the only way that you can like deal with the total victory of cultural Marxism is apparently like you just round them up and you shoot them. There's no other really way out. And that to me is like, it's not my favorite. I don't love that. That surely didn't have any bad implications for our current state of affairs, did it?
Well, I mean, I write this in the book that there's such a lack of imagination in Lynn's novel. Like, at no point does he try to figure out why someone would actually be drawn to the ideas that he sees as cultural Marxism. Like, there's one point in the text where you get slightly close to it, where apparently one of the characters, I think the line is, described as giving a stirring defense of cultural Marxism, but he doesn't elaborate any further than that. I sort of like,
no quotations.
Yeah. So why people might be at least won over to the arguments associated with political correctness or multiculturalism is entirely unfathomable to him, and I think that he's quite unwilling to. I mean, like a number of conservatives, to think about the persistence of racism after, Martin Luther King gave the "I Have a Dream" speech. I mean, for a lot of conservatives, he said that speech, and then racism was solved. Or engage with the insights of not only the second wave feminism, but also third wave feminism, of how that model of motherhood and marriage that was predominant in the post-war era was quite stifling and alienating, and kind of and worked in contradiction with what was happening in American post-war society more broadly. So I think it shows a total unwillingness to kind of confront these tensions, and he doesn't. People like Lynn's don't do the classic kind of like hand-wringing liberal think piece that publications can do. If we sent this reporter to Trump County, and this is a very sympathetic portrait of why people voted for the Republicans under Trump. They're always, for the right, their version of this is, here's this book from 1950 called The Authoritarian Personality that brainwashed your kid into becoming a transgender Antifa anti-racist activist for BLM or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the Bureau of Land Management.
That's why we have to overthrow the whole thing. Yeah, right. They want to tell you where you can put your cows. Yeah, it is very much like, just like, look at this evil thing. And you don't have to read it because I read it for you. So here's the evil thing. Mm-hmm. It's so evil. They did it because they were brainwashed, or they were angry because they are at the bottom of society through their own sort of doing, right? And so like they're trying to take everything down with them. It's like all this sort of movie villain kind of logic. It was like, oh, sure, yeah, of course that's why cultural Marxism or critical theory exists. It's because actually deep down it's fucking Ursula from The Little Mermaid. Mm-hmm. Right?
Always has
simply
been
the devil. Yeah, always has been. And yeah, that's another children's reference. I'm so sorry. I try not to do too much of it. It fails because I live with small children, and I have to like what they like, or I'll go insane. The choices are lean into it or be angry all the time.
And she's not changing, so we're leaning into her.
Sorry. Listen, I haven't summarized a single Bluey episode, so I think you should thank me, okay? And like, where's my medal? Anyway, so you point to kind of the think tank ecosystem, because one of the things that is happening with the right is they realize that they are losing the culture war. What they really need is like alternative media and kind of this like rebel underground kind of media system, right? Where they can create their own genealogy of how we came to this place, and how the solution is do traditional heteropatriarchy, go back to church, talk to your neighbors about why they should do the same, and like we'll slowly pull the center of gravity away from the cultural Marxists and the woke people and whatever. they really did the thing. Like, they put a lot of money and energy, and there was such a proliferation of documentaries and books that at this point you could fill a warehouse with like distinct copies of all of these pieces of media that are designed to basically get people there, right? Why did they feel like it was that important to be putting so many resources, so much energy into this kind of network of media production?
I think, I mean, oh gosh, that is such a good question. It has to do with, I mean, I guess a certain diagnosis that the American conservative movement put forward, in the middle of the 20th century, which at the time was quite accurate, where they said we're up against the liberal consensus, a kind of a more establishment media landscape where the main television channels are constrained by various laws by the FCC about balance. There's publications like the New York Times that abides by this idea of balance, of sort of sticking to what they see as a kind of rational middle. If you're sort of more to the right on the conservative movement, feels like you're being sort of pushed out of the boundaries of acceptable opinion. So over the course of the 20th century and going to the 21st, they're engaged in, I guess, a project of switching the dominant model of the media landscape from the ideal of balance, which, I mean, the idea that it was ever true objective balance is something we can totally debate.
Of course,
but switch it from that kind of that model of balance to the marketplace of ideas model, where you have to include like the two opposite ends of the ideological spectrum in a debate, because otherwise it's not, there isn't free speech, or there isn't like a free exchange of ideas.
Right.
So they establish a number of institutions, media groups, organizations in the latter half of the 20th century to sell their ideas, sell their kind of sell their arguments, either as op-eds, as interviews, as newspaper articles, really sort of engaging with the apparatus of mass media. I mean, the Free Congress Foundation, to this end, for instance, set up their own television channel called National Empowerment Television, which is one of the main ways that Lynn spread his message of cultural Marxism. Produced a whole documentary around it. And when we get to the 2000s and the 2010s, and there's the rise of Web 2.0, it's becoming much cheaper to buy a camcorder. You're getting to the point where phones have cameras on them, or you have the capacity to take short videos on them. There's a much more sort of participatory climate of media production. And if you've been going for decades and decades, our whole battle is with quote unquote mainstream media, what you can do now is that, well, everyone who is a conservative is now a potential media activist. And so you should go out there and sort of make content. And now we come to the 2020s where, even people who are quote unquote think tank researchers have social media presences. They almost tweet like influencers more than they tweet like, people who are, working inside the Beltway. And it's all part of this mission to combat the mainstream, which for certain portions of the right has been infected by cultural Marxism, or at least been sort of built up in a way based on the ideas of the Frankfurt School.
You see it starting in the 80s with a very innocent suggestion, right? Like, here are both sides, you decide. Right? Empowering the individual to use their best analysis skills to determine which one of these is the true part and which one is the incorrect part, right? Which on the surface, I think seems reasonable and fine. And most people would say, well, that's fine. Give me two circumstances and I will parse through them and I will determine which one is correct and which one is incorrect. The problem is how frequently the incorrect one gets chosen when you let people decide that. Like decide if those 5 black children like killed a woman in Central Park, right? And it's amazing how many people are like, they must have done it, right? When in reality, like, no, they didn't. But providing this rationale that, well, you are as qualified to determine this as somebody who has gone to school for 12, 20, 30 years, somebody who has done all of this work. Really, this work is not necessary to know this thing. That is just extra, which is designed to sort of push you away from having an active part in the process, right? All of this is sort of, we see it coming to bloom now, as you said, AJ, all these years later.
It's easy to just go viral if you're anybody. If you have a video that you can portray as showing how like the communists or the groomers or the whatever are like, infiltrating your systems, right? So like anybody can kind of take a little out of context shot or a screenshot of somebody's post, point out that some teacher has a pride flag in their classroom, or that some city council member wanted to try some kind of anti-racist policy, that you can take that and spin it into something so scary as like just one more data point in our massive cloud of data points about how endangered we are actually, and how persecuted we are, what victims we are because of cultural Marxism, wokeness. In your final like content chapter, as you talk about, these other concepts that are maybe more spoken out loud right now, things like wokeness, DEI, they when you look at the genealogy of the people who are pushing those narratives, where it's coming from is still this kind of lineage. And I think that's a really good point. I was going to bring up Chris Rufo because I love him. He, sometimes I or somebody else will say, oh, Chris Rufo, like he does the cultural Marxism conspiracy theory stuff. And then he will get really excited because he gets to say, did you know that cultural Marxism does not appear in my book at all? Like the phrase cultural Marxism. I can see you. I can see what you're doing with your head in your eyes. So I wanted to read something that he said in 2024 on Barry Weiss's podcast. That's another chance for an eye roll there. Where he was on there with Yasha Monk, and he wanted to disavow cultural Marxism as like a thing that he's into, and then goes on to define what he's upset about as exactly what it is. So here he goes. He says, I personally don't use the term cultural Marxist that Yasha has done. I don't do so in the book, although I think that the basic concept, if we leave the moniker aside, is that Marxism, the basic categorical distinctions, moved away from a purely orthodox materialist science or material determinism toward entities of culture, family, law, in a kind of Gramscian direction. Marcuse was a Marxist, and he was the most influential philosophical figure of the New Left, which is the prototype of the radical left we see today. He goes on to name drop Angela Davis, because, of course, as a Communist Party member and a devoted Marxist, that's where that all came from. Then within academia, points out it's like all long march through the institution stuff, right? Like it's absolutely beat for beat the cultural Marxism idea, where he's like, no, I wouldn't ever say that it's cultural Marxism. I'm just saying that what happened is a bunch of Marxists took over the culture, and that's different.
and it's so incredibly ironic because I mean, when he initially claimed that he didn't use cultural Marxism in the book, it was in response to a review by Moira Weigel, who points out quite clearly that the narrative that he uses in the book is based on, or at least indebted to a lot of the work that William S. Linds did, that Patrick Buchanan did about this, and his response to it was so peculiar because he said, "I was hoping that I would catch someone in this trap." And what you will find is I never use the phrase cultural Marxism or the Frankfurt School in my book. And it's so ironic because there is actually, and I'm just trying to find it here because I definitely wrote it down somewhere. He does use the phrase cultural Marxism in the book because I remember making a note about it and going, here it is. And so it's like it's not only so funny because, I mean, not only does he use the phrase cultural Marxism in the book, but he makes it out like he had this really clever plan of going like, oh, I know that there's going to be some sort of leftist professor who will write a review of my book and say that it's because I'm talking about like the Frankfurt School thinkers that I'm doing the Cultural Marxism Conspiracy. What I'll do is I won't even use the phrase cultural Marxism and Frankfurt School in the book. And then months down the line, I'll be like, aha, I got you. But
it's very much like, I'm not touching you. Like, you can't say I'm touching you because I'm not touching you. Like, dude, you did the theory. Like, you name dropped a bunch of Frankfurt School guys. Then you talked about like their acolytes, right? Like their students and what they did. And then you talked about how they impacted culture. And I'm supposed to sit here and be like, oh, you're right. You didn't do the cultural Marxism conspiracy theory. Of course not. I'm such a goofball. And he loves that, right? He loves like a little word game.
If you describe a duck in detail and then say later, like, I never said duck, what the hell are you talking about? Right? Like, it's still a duck.
It's got
like,
web feet and it quacks and it lives in a pond. But
it's
I didn't say duck.
Plane. Right, it's a boat plane, but I didn't say what it was. Like, relax.
But I mean, he is certainly much more interested in using the term critical race theory. I mean, there's that famous line from the New Yorker interview where he's like, well, linguistically, like the connotations of each word in that term is, well, at least what he sees as kind of antithetical to how many Americans see themselves and see how the world should work. I think he says that most ordinary Americans would see themselves as creative rather than critical, as individual rather than racial, and as practical rather than theoretical. So, like for him, he sort of chose this term because, like the way it sounds and the kind of affect that it might conjure up in the popular imagination, it feels like alien, or it feels like something that's being imposed from above. And this is very similar to why the reasoning that Linds had for choosing the term cultural Marxism as that kind of ideological weapon that he could use to delegitimize any kind of progressive change. For Lind, I mean, sort of like, well, if you can convince enough people that what they see as political correctness is actually secretly Marxist, then you can turn people off it.
Right.
Yeah, right. You just like paint it red and you're like, look, it's so red, so scary.
Yeah, right. It's the cultural use of that term, which had been being used for decades before to delegitimize the workings of government and innovations in a practical sense. Right now, we're like just utilizing that language to target what is essentially organic bottom-up change, right? We're the ones who decide that we're not going to use this language anymore. We're the ones who decide that we're not going to behave in certain ways. It is not so much a top-down thing, but it is defeatable if it is a top-down thing, right? And so that's how they portray it.
Yeah. Rufo is one of my fixations because he keeps doing this thing where he's like, he keeps trying to use linguistics, but not really. He just will say it's like totally linguistics. And that's where you get me mad because I'm a pedant and I have my little linguistics degree and I'm going to wave it at you and I'm going to yell, right? So he'll do that where he's like, oh yeah, I'm doing all this fun I am like, James Lindsay is the same way, where they'll like pick a word and be like, look, this word appears in this book and also that book, and that means that these two books are the same book. And it does make a linguist's brain explode the same way it makes anybody who can read freak out a little bit, where you're like, stop.
Good old conceptual James.
Good old yeah, I have a quote from him on my website because he got mad at me.
Which quote was this?
Oh, he got mad at me because I suggested that the grievance studies hoax might not have been totally reasonable and true. That like maybe they oversold their results just a touch. He got mad about that, I think, and he said something like freaking bougie academics, but he can't spell bougie, so it came out like bourgie academics.
Boogie.
Who are
academics
just they're just like they're just up like butthurt that their pet theories turned out not to be true or something. Like he got so mad at me, and I was like, listen, I just think you're a liar. I don't know. Like, I can't help it.
Well, my favorite clip of James Lindsay is when he's having a conversation with Jordan Peterson, and Jordan Peterson is talking about, I think, Paradise Lost, and he brings up Lucifer, and James Lindsay is, if I may, the devil's referred to as the morning star, as you say, but what do you do in the morning? You wake up. Woke. And so it's like this weird like word association game to try and link wokeness to Satanism.
Break out the red string and the bulletin board tax, because we got a good one here.
Right. Jordan Peterson loved that. I'm sure he started crying as he's wont to do.
Yeah. Just to prove that I wasn't making it up, this is page 201 from Rufo's book, where he says, teachers and administrators, ensconced in the public bureaucracy and secured by the public trust, engage in an absurd theatre of cultural Marxism, spinning stories about the pedagogy of the oppressed to their privileged, suburban, predominantly white students. So there we go. He does use the phrase cultural Marxism in this book. Yeah.
Right there. He wrote her.
So the two possible explanations is that he didn't have this crazy scheme to try and trick someone, or he didn't write his own book. So we'll have to decide which one is true.
Either way,
which one is true. Yeah,
I think both.
You're telling me he's not totally honest. Is that what you're trying to tell me right now? I want to also bring out my one, like the like Christopher Rufo quote, which was a tweet that he did in response to James Lindsay. So like we're really in the zone now. So on March 15th, 2021, James Lindsay said, critical race theory is falling. Its end, but not the end, is coming. Sorry for that big pause because he put the wrong it and I got lost. So yeah, the end of critical race theory is coming, right? And Chris Rufo says, I agree with you. The activists are realizing that their ideas, once put into practice, are generating discontent. Their racial coalition is also breaking apart. Asian Americans in particular are revolting against CRT, which punishes them more than any other group. We have successfully frozen their brand, critical race theory, into the public conversation and are steadily driving up negative perceptions. We will eventually turn it toxic as we put all of the various cultural insanities under that brand category. It does this whole deal, right? I think one of your points that you make in the book so beautifully is that their thinking, like their logic of why things aren't perfectly placid and why like there's discontent, why there's struggle, is not because stuff is bad and people don't like it and they want it to be better. No, it's because of the theories. And so he put that in here too, where he said the activists are realizing their ideas are generating discontent, right? And then he also points out that all he's doing is taking anything that happens that goes viral, that people go, ugh, I don't like that, and going, that's CRT. The thing that you didn't like, that's CRT. And we're going to put it in the bucket of stuff we don't like. And on the bucket, we're going to put a label that says CRT. And like, he's admitting essentially that it doesn't really matter what the thing is. He's going to call it CRT either way. Right. Which I don't know. I love a guy who will be like, excuse me, world, I'm going to do some lying. Okay, I'm going to do a bunch of lying. And then what you do after that, whatever, like enjoy my lies. And then get 600 different profiles on the New York Times about what a like brave truth teller he is.
That is, it's just the same strategy used over and over again. I mean, you could look back in the congressional records and listen to politicians in the 1930s and 40s and 50s and 60s saying that something was communism, right? And it's like not communism. It's like school busing. It's like integrated school busing is communist, right? Like lunch
communism.
for 4 children is communist.
Yeah, not beating your children is communism. Right. Seat belts are communism. Right. Like anything that's like public health, public safety, any kind of like
civil
educational policy, civil rights, voting rights, like it's all communism. And therefore you should not do it. And like really, what's the ultimate goal there? It is the atomization of society, right? Into like privatized, deregulated, it's going to be poop lettuce for everyone forever. So enjoy, right? Enjoy your diarrhea lettuce because that's the goal.
Well, yeah.
I went a little Tucker Carlson there. That's the rule. That's the goal now. It's diarrhea for all.
Right. With garbage pickup from waste management and food brought to us by Taco Bell and Walmart and water from Coca-Cola Company. Everything
we
should
won't
be
have
terrible.
Any Taco Bell slander here. All right. The reason why they told us about the poop lettuce is because they found out about the poop lettuce. Okay. Let's give them their due.
I need some sort of clarification about diarrhea lettuce.
Here in the United States, we're experiencing something of an epidemic of shitting forever. And that is happening to us because of bagged lettuce and other fresh produce that is tainted with something called cyclospora, I think. Yeah, a parasite.
Yeah,
that's getting into us and giving us the diarrhea. And it looks like one of the origin points is Taylor Farms.
There's no poop in the lettuce.
I mean, I think. Well, where did the parasite come from? Probably poop, right?
Okay, fair enough.
I don't know. Anyway, but it's also making us poop is the thing. And it is the official theory of the 5-4 podcast. And I'm going to go ahead and echo their theory that the reason Lindsey Graham died is because he pooped himself to death. He pooped so hard that his aorta broke and then he died. Okay. And that is what happened. I endorse that theory. But anyway, so like we're having a bad time over here. Okay. Gastrointestinally speaking. And it's because of the deregulation and the halting of reporting of foodborne illnesses in the products of our farms. And so one of the companies that's like potentially responsible for it is Taylor Farms, which has a long history of bribing the Trump administration to deregulate the food industry. And so that's where we're at. Okay. So I'm telling you, right now, you can officially say the cultural Marxism conspiracy theorists have given us the diarrhea lettuce. And that's where we're at.
Sorry, we're not all on the lovely South Coast enjoying the beaches of Brighton. That would be marvelous instead of diarrhea lettuce.
And lettuce that doesn't have poo in it. Really, that's the dream.
Yeah, you and your nanny state with your non-poo having lettuce.
I'll tell you, it was a dream. It was a dream we felt like we had for so long, and waking up to this nightmare has been it's been shitty.
It's been rough. Listen, and then now we're all breathing in smoke too because everything's on fire because we're not taking care of our climate. And so life is good over here in the land that is resisting cultural Marxism.
The president says that the problem is that no one is raking the leaves, right?
You got to rake,
If only we had more people raking, things
everybody a rake for every household.
Very Gaddafi of him.
We have got to wrap up. Listen.
I have something that's a little related to this because
Yes, great.
the most common uses of cultural Marxism in the United States right now that I'm coming across is in statements by the Office of Budget Management, saying that we've got to cut all of these culturally Marxist programs, cut all this cultural Marxist regulation. That means that you can't have parasites in the lettuce. We don't want to have programs that teach people in rural areas how to read, or how to give people in rural areas access to like a regular doctor, etc., and kind of peeling back anything that is even loosely associated under like the DEIA umbrella, which includes, like just basic food, public safety, health, all of the things that you need to reproduce a population consistently and, safely.
Yeah, I heard that they were doing depopulation, the cultural Marxists, but it sounds like actually with things like vaccines and safe to eat food, maybe they're actually doing population. That's interesting.
Well,
okay, so let's wrap up. Right. Well, fuck. That'll be our wrap up. You, of course, did the classic like left-wing book thing of like, shit, I have 5 pages left. Where's the way forward? Right? What's the I say it with love. It's what you do. It's what you have to do, right? Okay, so what do we do? How do we resist the like total takeover of everything that keeps us alive?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it is like my responsibility to tell you what to do to rescue us from all the bad shit. Do the whole LaRouche thing of saying, I've got one crazy solution to all of life's problems. There are a couple of things, and I think that one of them is to work in a more coalitional way between different political struggles. I think that this might be helpful to provide, provide the organizational basis for a kind of left-wing alternative to the kind of the right wing, the right wing's political projects that we see now. I also place a focus on like the importance of culture. I mean, so much of the anti-cultural Marxism project is saying, we've got to shut down all of these places where culture can take place, whether that's, youth centers or theaters that are funded by public money, also subsidized bookshops like you're seeing in, Argentina under Javier Milei, sort of closing them down and making them sort of compete for customers. I think that my recommendation is that we need to actually create what could in a way be described as a sort of a positive cultural Marxist program of kind of constructing a kind of popular, inclusive, egalitarian sort of cultural sphere where sort of people can participate, collaborate on things, and sort of rebuild as kind of rebuild some of those spaces and community that have been sort of hollowed out by the neoliberal project. I mean, I quote a speech from that Jeremy Corbyn gave at the Glastonbury Music Festival in 2017, where he says, in every child there's a painting, in every child like there's a novel, and every child there's someone who's into sports. I think that is such a kind of like a uplifting vision that kind of respects everyone's kind of human dignity and like appreciates that people have that creative potential in them, while at the same time knowing that to be able to bring that to life, you have to have a kind of a collective sort of social safety net, but not only just a safety net, but like collective institutions that allow people to participate in things that aren't just sort of going to work or going back home, like having like spaces where they can be part of something sort of larger than themselves and give an expression to the way that they think, the way that they see the world, the way that they think music should be or painting should be. So instead of having LaRouche saying, this is how art should be, this is how literature should be, this is how politics should be, having something that's a bit more pluralistic and participatory is maybe an alternative that we can maybe work on together, maybe.
That's right. Yeah, it demands kind of investment, right? It's like you have to be able to create the opportunities and make it work, which means you need space and you need staff and you need materials. Right. And it is the official line of liberal currents in general that like we can have nice things. We can. And we should invest in a world where we have nice things. And one of those nice things is places to come together and explore our interests. And build up our minds and our souls in ways that don't necessarily represent a direct return on investment, but actually just like are good for us. Right?
Hey, don't let the Protestant ethics people, don't let them hear you say that. They freak out when there's no ROI, tangibly speaking. They don't consider parks ROIs either. Okay, so don't try to hit them with that esoteric society's nicer, because they'll bitch at you that they can't put $1 price on that. So good luck.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, keep the Columbia Gorge pristine and beautiful, please. Oh my God, please don't log the hell out of our gorge. I'm gonna freak out. Sorry. They want to log it. Trump wants to sell off a bunch of Oregon's forest for profit, and we cannot. It's actually worth some money to keep that stuff nice. Just for niceness sake, but also for our climate.
However, if you cut all of the trees down, then there's no sort of like wildfires. Obviously, there's no fuel. If you live at being a barren wasteland, exactly.
It's all good. Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So we've solved that problem, and that's great. Thank you for that. I love that. I love the point that you make that this whole idea of the economic war and the culture war being distinct things. Like if we let go of that, we can allow ourselves to understand that like human life is both things, and it is important to remember you can't sell one out to achieve success in the other, because they are intertwined.
Absolutely.
And I think that is super important. It's also important to remember that corporate DEI policies are not the only like thing that progressivism is. Like it's easy to get into that mode where it's like they're attacking DEI, therefore like let's just focus all our energy on protecting like what essentially was like cover your ass legal policy for companies, right? It's like it's a very privatized, individualistic, capitalistic way to think about what we need. We talked to Victor Ray about this earlier, about like what the history of DEI really is, and that like we don't have to fall into that frame. We can be more expansive in our definition of like what actual egalitarianism and pluralism actually looks like. Very important.
And corporate DEI feels to most people like something that's sort of imposed from the outside, and this is like the emotional core behind the classic right-wing talking points of the HR departments have taken over everything and they're forcing you to have pronouns in your
the
emails.
HR ladies.
I hate them.
I
would, so the point is to like develop a kind of a political alternative showing, well, actually, you do need anti-racism, you do need anti-sexism, you need to be sort of anti-transphobic in a way that people feel like they're in a way that's sort of, I guess, empowering for people, or sort of a way that sort of makes sense to people, or feels like an organic way of like the expression of their own values, their own ideals, rather than like a rule that's sent down from some sort of from a bureaucratic level.
Sure. It has to reflect some type of our custom, as opposed to that law, which half the society always subconsciously hates, right? And like roots against. And we're weird like that, but we can overcome it. We're in the process of doing it. That's why there is this focus on the cultural aspects of what you've described accurately as just a two-sided problem for them, right? Cultural and economics. They're attacking that because they failed over the course of decades to properly re-educate the people into thinking that Social Security was bad. They failed, and so now they're taking the different tact that the cultural ideas are the bad part, actually. And
they took the Social Security, and then they got mad at the Social Security because it was maybe going to go to some people who weren't white.
Ooh.
Well, that was beautiful. Is there anything else that you would like for our listeners to know?
I am working on a book about the far right in Britain and the future of anti-fascist organizing. But I'm also constantly working on what I guess will now be my third book on the Muppets from space. So that will be but partially about the history of Gonzo as a character, but also about the figure of the alien in sort of American fiction, and particularly at the end of the 20th century.
This is fascinating.
Yeah,
I want you to tell us everything.
You gotta come back for both books. You gotta come back so we can talk
absolutely
anti-fascism, and we can talk about Gonzo and Dr. Teeth.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, thrilling. Well, AJ Woods, thank you so much for all of your contributions to this discussion. Thank you for the book. It is fantastic. Everyone pick up the Cultural Marxism Conspiracy Theory, and we will see you later. This has been Have the Answer, where understanding questions have the answer. Bye!
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Half the Answer, presented by Liberal Currents. You can find Half the Answer anywhere you get your podcasts. Liberal Currents is an entirely listener and subscriber-funded publication, which includes programs like Half the Answer and Neon Liberalism. So, if you like what you've heard and wish to contribute, you may do so at liberalcurrents.com and through Patreon. And remember, understanding a question is half the answer.